Hey everybody, I am so happy to be here today and to be part of what I assume is an amazing time that you're having and all of the ideas that are percolating through your system right now, all of the times that you have said yes, yes, there's something to be done here. Yes, I can do those things. Yes, we can do those things. Why are we not thinking about this differently? All those wonderful positive thoughts that are becoming this web between. I know I'm being very optimistic because we are living through hard times right now, all of us, and most everything that you've heard to some degree or another has to be asking you to make change, and change is hard. The human brain is actually wired to resist change. With change is a hard thing for our brains to do, for us to do culturally, for whether we're part of a neighborhood or whether we're a part of a quote industry, a movement, trying to actually go back into the roots of that and say, let's take a fresh look at it has been hard. Now, the thing that I am going to be teaching you guys right now about building a better daily routine or instilling ritual into the lives of the animals in your care, specifically the cats, is something that I've spent the better part of the last 2 years more taking from shelter to shelter to shelter here in the US and knocking the bugs out of it and seeing how many times I can get somebody to challenge it so that I can tell them, well, what if? Um, and it does actually touch on some fundamental things that have been passed down, for in a very strange way, although there's so much writing that has been done in the world of animal welfare, it's also sort of an oral tradition. It's something that you walk into a shelter environment and as a new employee, new volunteer, and you are receiving handed down information that have been handed down for generations of shelter workers and volunteers. And there does come a point, and that point is now, hopefully, where we just think about it for a second and think about the whys. And where it comes to the world of cats, I am your big, like the question mark on one shoulder and the exclamation point on the other shoulder. And hopefully today, what I'm at the very least going to do is providing the space for that light bulb and maybe just that way of going, you know, if there is that moment that feels like the wind just got sucked out of you for a second, that's okay. Because what comes after that moment is a new breath and a new way of looking at it. So there's not one time that you're going to hear me that I hope subtextually you're going to be hearing judgment coming from me. I have worked in the same world as everybody in this room, virtual room, and I know how hard it is. And to reiterate what we were talking about in the keynote address is knock out all those things as I'm going through here that will say, can't do it because of budget, can't do it because of people power, can't do it because it's a bad time, can't do it because we're underwater. Whatever that reason is, there might be a kernel in here that you can put on your whiteboard and revisit. But just allowing for that kernel is important because we are talking about the welfare of the animals in your care. Look, let's face facts. I am not, I hate the whole like, well, cats are second-class citizens. But by and large, in terms of the amount of effort or budget or people power or just whatever else, cats don't seem to get the kind of attention dogs do, by and large. I'm being very careful here, by and large. And to a degree, it's because cats are not the squeakier wheel. They when they are stressed, they are going to go backwards. They're going to go more into the shadows. They are going to become less demonstrative because that's what a prey animal that will do when they feel vulnerable. We're going to go backwards. And that's some of what I want to teach you about today as well. So let's get off this slide here for a second. We can go into something else. I want to just run through some things here. Some of these slides, you're going to be getting access to these. So in terms of the resources, they're going to be available to you, and I don't have to run them down. But this is the needs boil down into the most basics: access to natural light, fresh air, exercise, rest, mental stimulation, comfort, choice. Now, with all that said, the first vision that we have of cats in shelters starts to knock a lot of these down. I mean, from natural light to fresh air, definitely to exercise, mental stimulation, choice, in a 2 by 3 cage, that pretty much gets knocked out as well. So when we're talking about the very basics of needs, while still doing our best with the numbers that we have, they are by and large not being met, especially if those cats wind up in your care for an extended period of time. And speaking of which, that's the first thing. Let's just get them out. I've seen a lot of, in the past couple of years especially, reasons don't, why they don't leave the building, why they are there for an extended period of time when they just don't need to be. And then we have what I was saying before, the fact that the longer a cat stays in care and they're not being enriched and they're not having these needs met, further and further back into this kennel. So that one that you see down there at the bottom right, that cat coming forward, that's a cat in week 1, week 2, week 3. You get past there, it's backwards, backwards, backwards into the dark. And that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more reasons we come up with for them not to leave the shelter, the more they're going to stay because they're not being enriched. So here's the kind of things that over the past, I mean, cumulatively over the past 25 or so years, but really since the pandemic and going out and teaching a lot of these classes again, this is what I'm seeing over and over again. And when I say common problems, there's a lot of things that make problems unique when it comes to the care of cats in shelters. When I say shelters, I also mean rescues as well. Whatever the verbiage that we're using doesn't really matter. It's small organizations, governmental, and every stop in between. But these are the things that I can almost predict I'm going to see at some point in the shelters that I'm visiting. And that is the lack of basic care, the standard practices, the things that I just went down before. I think we wind up getting the rituals that we have to get through in a certain day, the cleaning, the sanitizing, the rounds, the getting ready for adoptions to open, getting through the day. We will, a lot of times for the cats, again, wind up not having the kind of access to those basic standards that I was talking about before. Um, Cats being held in the back, I see that constantly these days. And it's a shame because they're highly adoptable cats half the time. Or they've demonstrated one behavior that if we think about the factors I'm going to talk about in just a minute, you'll see that it's a natural behavior, and now they're being assessed or they're being held back sometimes because of a scratch or something like that. The enrichment is something that if anything, if we walk away today with something to talk about, it's enrichment for cats. Because to me, that's the thing that I see time and time again as having little to no weight being given to their daily life. It's just epidemic, at least in the shelters that I've been to. And interaction to me is part of the little enrichment or exercise. There's also, over the past years, there's been this uptick in please don't touch the cats, don't put your fingers in the bars, the plexiglass that goes in between us and the cats. And I would love to see a reconsideration of that as well. The interaction is a positive thing, and we know that to be true. The more access that we have to these cats, the faster they will actually leave. Pathway planning in the world of cats is difficult. We all know that. Assessing a cat in the shelter, and this is from someone who's been there for 30 years, I think almost impossible. Unless they present themselves as the most social dog cat in the world, coming up to you, rubbing up against you, a little bit of a head bonk, come on in, let me offer you a drink kind of cat. Otherwise, trying to figure out who that cat is within the first 24, 48, 72 hours is very difficult. And so, what are we going to do with cats who are not going to thrive in the environment that you have to work with? And then this cycle of isolation and mental decline. I think again, knowing what a dog looks like when they are in that cycle of isolation and decline is much more readily available to us than with cats. With cats, they are going to hide their suffering, whether that's mental or physical. That's their job in nature, is to hide that. And when in a state of chronic stress, it's just going to be this manifested nothing is what you're going to see. And when you've got much bigger problems happening, that nothing hangs out in the back there of our everyday work. So here's the thing that I want to start working, because this is in terms of a sort of a fundamental change that we can make for the cats in our care. This is where it starts. So what I teach about in all aspects of my books and shows and whatever else is about the raw cat. And the raw cat is that ancestral cat that is just alive and kicking in the back of your cat's mind. I don't care which cat it is. I don't care if they're a 14-year-old Persian who's never seen the outside of a house. Doesn't matter. They still have that cat alive and well. When you think about the fact that out of all of the beings that ever roamed this planet, 99% of those beings no longer roam this planet, but cats do. And we can trace cats back over those millions of years. Just look up the being called Pseudolurus. And Pseudolurus walked this planet between 8 and 20 million years ago. And we can trace that 14-year-old Persian in your lap to Pseudolurus. So the things that kept cats alive for all that time, they still have accessible to them every day. And we also forget that we didn't really have all that much to do when it came to the domestication of cats. With dogs, it's a very different story. There's a story of coevolution that we have with cats that we don't have with dogs, that we don't have with cats. Cats and humans came to a very good sort of mutual working agreement. I'm going to start collecting food here, especially grains. The mice and the rats are fouling that and killing off all the humans here. Cats come around. They're like, don't worry. We got this. Humans are like, that's amazing. And flash forward a couple of tens of thousands of years, and you have where we are right now. Only in the past couple hundred years have we even considered, okay, we are not just co-workers. You are my pet, and we are going to cohabitate together out of choice because I love you. And that is a fairly recent experiment in terms of a consistent experiment. And we're talking, I mean, the first cat show was at the end of the 19th century. Cat litter, this is the one that always blows my mind. Cat litter, the invention of cat litter, which, if you want to think about it, that's the rolling out of the red carpet saying, come on in. Come on into my house and poop in this box, please. And now I have a product that formalizes that. That was not until the 1940s. The 1940s. So now we're talking about what, 80 years, right? Am I right? Somewhere in that neighborhood. I'm a cat person, not a mathematician. But That if you take those millions of years, all of that evolution that got the cat and the human to that front step, and what got them in that product that got them in, along with canned food, etc., is the tiniest drop in the bucket. But now we are expecting from that moment cats to act like, for lack of a better word, to act like dogs, to act like a pet, to behave like a pet. When that raw cat behavior comes out in ways that we don't appreciate, that's what lands cats in shelters. That's what lands cats outside of those four walls of the home because we don't appreciate those unwanted behaviors. We see this dual track happening, which is what you see between the house cat and the raw cat, this divergence. We appreciate the dog cat. We appreciate, even though we'd like to have that concept of the wild, the mysterious in our lives, we embrace that more house cat. While the feral cat population is being sort of ostracized and pushed aside because that part of their world is not all that appreciated. The thing that got them here with us, it's almost like the cat has outlived their usefulness in that way. And now we're embracing this expectation of what a cat should be that is not one that can be met. And this is the meeting point. The house cat and the feral cat, the raw cat, are friends in life and friends in the home. You get where I'm going. So here we go. The first thing I want to talk about is feeding and cleaning. First thing that you see there, feed 2 meals per day. Wet food for all cats. Remove food after the meal. I can already see some of you going, whoa, 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 wait. We don't have, this is the way we've always done it. We free feed cats. And that's the first, if there's one thing that you leave this session with, that you at least start talking about, it's this one thing. Because what we are not doing for cats in our care is setting a circadian rhythm, which is what we do when we eat. When we eat our meals in a day, we are setting our circadian rhythms. We are productive, we are alive in certain ways because we eat at a certain time, we rest at a certain time, and we work or play at certain times. Cats are deprived of this completely. And also in terms of just their overall health. Even if we think of cats in the wild, the raw cat, as being opportunistic and hunters, and they're going to pick at when they can, you still break that down and you're still looking at hours between times where they successfully either hunt or forage. So the food is just not always available to them. There's so much that we can find out about cats. And by the way, have cats come to us. Cats we're having trouble pathwaying, we're having trouble socializing or getting them to a point where they're socializable enough to be put on the adoption floor. If food is not our friend, and a cat who's even remotely hungry is a cat who we can work clicker training with, we can have wand time with, or explore different parts of the world, or harness train, or get on leashes, or whatever it is, or to just greet their adoring public when they come in. If they are waiting for food, or if they are at the tail end of the meal to rest to mealtime, that's the time. That's when we'll see. So imagine that there's a world in which all of this happens because we start regulating their food. And that's it. Start feeding meals. Now, me saying 2 meals a day, that's my ideal. You start the day when you first come in with a meal, you end the day before lights out with a meal. Again, thinking about circadian rhythm. Lights up, sun is rising. Cats are crepuscular beings. They are going to be the most active between at the times of sun up, sundown, dusk and dawn. That's baked into the raw cat. So we can come to that place with them. Lights come up, feed. Lights go down about an hour before that happens, feed again. And then as a process of cleaning, we pick up their bowls. We don't just keep them sitting there all day long. Now, when we think about where food comes from the rest of the part of the day, here's the fun part. Now we are quote unquote forced to start doing some enrichment because that's how cats get food. They get it whether we're doing some clicker training, whether we're doing some play with them, where we intersperse treats with activity, whether they're we have people coming in to visit with them and perhaps think about adopting them. They have treats on them. We're giving them food at that point. They are now coming forward for that. That's their motivation. We get cats at their best energy levels and we reward that with food. And that's where they get their food the rest of the day. Now, I know that this is tough. When we talk about saying yes to something, that's why I'm spending so much time on this, because feeding is such a big deal. I've got volunteers that I've worked with who have been volunteering with cats for years and years, and I say to them, no, you can't just put a bunch of food out there. And they will leave and they'll have some treats in their pocket and they'll sprinkle it out there. We feel the need to keep feeding. You will notice a difference in the cat's behavior in your care when you start their day by ritualizing around food. All right, to move forward. And this literally just saw this last week. I was walking into a rescue. I won't say where. I walked in and this is what I saw. And there's versions of this being played out everywhere. I don't know why socially, culturally it is that we feel like we always have to feed cats. That they're somehow, as opposed to dogs, not going to know how to secure food or how to do food, how to digest their food in a time sensitive way. It's still, it just amazes me, but this is the how not to feed cats. The second thing we're going to talk about is making kennels better. Now, yes, it's very hard to bake in the concept of choice when it comes to where we find cats in kennels. But what we can do, we can start using some of these types of products. Now, the Tomahawk Feral Cat Den, that's just an old standby. I mean, we were using those 30 years ago when we would have ferals that were trapped. We would transfer them from the trap into one of these. That's where they would be. We've now started using them more and more often inside kennels because it gives them that freedom to sort of move away from their adoring public a little bit. The challenges with those is to make sure that we are communicating with one another about where was that yesterday. Because if we just keep it with the opening to the back of the kennel and giving that cat the ability to hide all the time, and by the way, we're still feeding them all the time, why would they ever come out? We do have to balance in comfort and challenge. It's the place I call the challenge line. Comfort and challenge always has to be looked at, and not just by one person, not just by one volunteer, but there has to be communication about where was this thing yesterday. Anyway, the cat cave from Shoreline, I love something like this because not only does it give us a little bit of up and a little bit of down, and a little bit of under, but if you see how it's grooved in the middle there, that's the ingenious part of this thing, where a cat can lay in it and still be in that sort of that little couch thing that they always do, that little this thing, it recreates that and it gives them a place to lie. The hide perch and go, which we see in the bottom, there's other versions of this. I don't think that this is on the market presently, but the thing I love about things like this, it goes in their kennel with them. They are sitting in it all the time. They're eating inside it. They can come and go. They have their bed inside it. And then it turns into a carrier. It goes home with them. Being able to send a cat home with something that smells like them is instant territory, instant ownership. Raw cat is instantly happy because they have something of their own in their new home when they first go into what I call their base camp, their first room when they go home. So that's ingenious about that. And then the cage hammock, which I love, and I can get specs on how to make these hammocks, by the way, that they are, first of all, a job for any volunteer who's at all handy, that you can make these and then they live same way. They live inside the kennel with the cat, gives them a little bit of hiding space, but still the ability to meet the public a little bit. It's their resting spot and it goes home with them as well. And imagine that on the underside of your dining room chair when your cat comes out and they know that there's a place again that smells like them, that keeps the raw cat happy because they have territory. So that's another great way to do this. This is what I call the blanket explosion. So again, we're talking about well-meaning staff and volunteers who see a cat who's a little shy that day, not feeling all that much like seeing everybody. So they grab the nearest blanket, I always use the Little Mermaid beach towel that's hanging that got donated last week. That gets hung up. Now, nobody moves that towel because, well, somebody put it there. They must have had a reason for it. But then they see another cat who's got an equally hard time. So then they put up another towel or another blanket. Take a look at the one on the right there. I use something like that, which we first broke out at a shelter I was working with where we were trying to prove this point. That's just fabric that you can use that will reflect your organization's colors. Again, we're giving volunteers who are fabric handy a job, and you see how it can also be moved. And then we have communication with one another at certain times of the day when we're going to move it. It's not just close it because Henry doesn't look happy and open it because he does. We're going to give Henry a quarter so that when we see his face, we can open it a half. And we communicate with each other about the time of day that Henry is the most active. That, again, I'm getting this back to the food. That we know that if Henry's hungry, he's going to start peeking out more. We can set that challenge line for Henry on a daily basis through the circadian rhythm that he has, and then use these blankets or these sight blockers for their maximum benefit, and not just have that impulse. Henry looks scared, so I'm going to build the blanket for it over there. We can now have a more informed discussion about what's best for Henry on an ongoing basis. Again, having these rituals, and what I'm going to get to next is the last piece of this on an everyday basis. Not only is it great for the cat, it starts to foster conversation between all of us who are working on behalf of that cat. Everybody is speaking the same language in terms of where those challenge lines are, what his favorite treats are, what his favorite enrichment is, what we can then send Henry home with and say, listen, for the first week, this is what Henry needs. Take this blanket, it's great, it'll go over here, you can cover this, and then use this toy to play with Henry because he loves to play with it. He loves it if you play it, especially like this. Then this is his favorite treat. This is what he eats every day. You see how this all starts to blend together to make for also a successful adoption. Because in those first 2 weeks, someone's either going to bond with a cat or they're going to say, the cat's been doing nothing but hiding for a week. And, I'm not going to just sit here and wait, which we've all seen 100,000 times where returns happen just because of a lack of bonding that happened. Rituals also help when it comes to building examples of bond that we can then pass on to adopters. This is the last big one, and I know I'm going to run out of time in a minute, but enrichment is not happening. It's just not happening. Toys are not available. I don't see them available. And I'm not including a sparkle ball that's thrown into a kennel. They're not going to play with that. I mean, they may bat it around for a second. It'll wind up in their water, but it's not play. Here's the place that I would like to challenge you to think a new way. Cats should be playing. Playing is hunting. Hunting is what reminds the raw cat that they are alive and well. Sitting without any enrichment for a cat is poison for the raw cat. It's just poison. And I'm not seeing enough of it. And what I would love to see is the thought that you might have a room that you can take cats into. Yes, there is the momentary, okay, I have to get a cat in a kennel to transport them to this next thing. But I just want you to start thinking about the resources that we're not giving cats in our care. I can't tell you how many times I've walked through the back sides of shelters and seen this is how you build an ice cream cone for a dog. Here are all the Kongs that are sitting here ready to be filled and frozen. Here is what we can do. Here's the leashes and the collars and whatever. And then you go and look for cat enrichment or a cat enrichment schedule, and it just doesn't exist. That's the least that we can do at this point because we have to remember that that activity, that hunting behavior is absolutely integral, that we are opening cats to physical decline if we don't allow the manifestation of this hunting activity. Again, we're talking about millions of years boiled down into this one moment where if the raw cat is not fed the sustenance for their being, I know you might think I'm being completely dramatic, but I'm doing it for a reason because I think this is that crucial point. Cats are not being enriched. There are things that we can do when they're in a kennel, though. If you cannot get them out, we can still do just a little bit of wand play. You can do clicker training inside of a cage. You can get a cat to do a high five or a sit. Bring people who know clicker training from the dog world into the cat world. That's how I learned. There was not any way for me to learn how to enrich a cat when we were only dealing with kenneled cats. But a dog trainer came in, showed me how to teach a cat a sit, and that opened everything up for me. Scratching surfaces, you see on the right here, it's called a stretch and scratch. If you can't get something like it, corrugated cardboard with baggy ties around it serve the equal purpose. It's a scratching surface that gets mounted on the kennel and again goes home with the cat. They mark an area with the scent glands in their paws and the visual of their scratching. And for the raw cat, there's nothing better. There's nothing better. And like I said, I think clicker training is absolutely the best thing in the world. Food puzzles. Yes, most of them are made for dogs. That's fine. I'll ignore that little part of things. But the same food puzzles we use for small dogs, we can use for cats. If they are motivated because they're slightly hungry, we are working that brain, that foraging brain. And again, keeping them healthy just by foraging for food. These are the small things we can do. Snuffle mats, things that we used for nosing work with dogs, we now bring into cats. We just hide their treats in something. The one thing I'd love for you to just pledge is that I will no longer just dish out treats. Use those treats, use that food to have social time, to have enrichment time and exercise, to bring a cat out of their hiding spot where they might not have done it before. We ask a little bit of challenge and it goes a very long way. But just that commitment to enrichment. I have shown that with an investment of $100 you can transform a broom closet into a place where cats can play. And again, I can make that material available to you. But there are no excuses here. We need to find a way to institutionalize environmental and just other types of enrichment for cats because that is essential for the raw cat and for their mental and physical health. And I know I am pretty much out of time. I'm making all this stuff available, all of this stuff that you're seeing here. Why do I go for wet food? There's plenty of information about that, including if you go to my YouTube channel, you will see a whole playlist about why wet food and why we need to turn our backs from dried kibble. I know it's what gets donated more times than not, but anytime you can even have a wish list where wet food is included goes a long way. Remembering that the raw cat gets at least 70 to 80% of their daily hydration from food and not from water. They're not natural drinkers. But the rest of the stuff, like I said, you'll be able to see all this. Um, this is just an example of a checklist. That's all it is. It's an example and it's a conversation starter. I figured I'd give you something to just start the conversation and then talk amongst yourselves and amongst your volunteers about what that daily checklist could look like. But one of the things that is the most important, and here is not just the checklist, it's the journaling that goes with it. It's the note taking that goes along with it. The commitment that if I spend a minute with this cat, I write a sentence. That's important. Their their hurdles, their challenges, their likes and dislikes, their aversions, their progress. These are things that with how many hands will that cat pass through in a given day? 10? There's information in there that's just gold if we put it all together and form a story out of all of those interactions. That story is what goes home with that cat, and it becomes the foundation of the next chapter of their lives. And I just figured I would just show you some of the happy cats that I've worked with over the years. And I know all of these cats. And again, whether you're working with cats in communal environments, whether you haven't gotten there at this point and it's just kennels, there is no one thing that you cannot do because of their environment. There are things you can do. There's lots of innovation happening on a daily basis. And to echo the thing that we have been talking about since the keynote. This is a time of great change. This is a time where we get to say, not only why have we been doing it this way, but what if? What if we did this? Open up your blue sky cat thinking mind. It is the time for that to come into the light. We need that level of innovation right now. Change is available to us. We can make these changes. That the way the world is moving at this point is staggering for an old person like me. But I can tell you that the time is now to have your voice heard. Anyway, you guys, thank you so much for allowing me the time to talk to you. Thank you so much for the work that you do every single day of your lives. Thank you for how much you love the cats, the dogs, and every other being that comes into your hands. And thank you for being a rescuer. That is the heart that we all share. And let's take all of that and make as much change as we possibly can make for the world around us. Mwah. Thank you again.